Welcome. This week's Torah portion is Parshas Shlach. And in Parshas Shlach, we are learning about how the Jewish people, when they're about to go into the land of Israel, the Holy Land, some people got into their minds that it was necessary to check it out to make sure it was really something that they wanted to undertake as a mission. And as a result, there were spies sent into the land of Israel, 12 chosen from the leaders of the 12 tribes. And unfortunately, we're going to see that the results were not good because 10 of those spies lost their strength of their faith in God Almighty, and they began to misinterpret and see the world around them as a hostile place, and then pass on that message to the Jewish people, which caused the Jewish people to despair and to seek to return to the land of Egypt. Incredibly enough, after all the miracles that they've seen, all the miracles from every possible angle, the splitting of the sea, the giving of the Torah, yet the effect of despair is so great that a person could even decide that he wants to give up on his inheritance, on the Holy Land that was promised to the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He could even decide to give that up and to trek back with his head hung to become a slave again in Egypt. How is that possible? We need to understand that because it's very, very relevant to us. As a matter of fact, we need to understand that whatever is happening in the Torah portion is exactly what is happening in before our eyes and before our ears in the world as we speak. We see that in the book of the Midbar, in the Parshas Shlach, in Perek Yud Gimel, Pasuk Chof Zayin, this is where the spies come back and begin their relating their intelligence report. And the intelligence report, this is chapter 13, verse 26. It says, they say that they came to the land, Asher Shalachtana, that you sent us to, V'gam zavas chalav dvash hi v'zeh priya. It's a land, abundant land with a lot of milk and with the honey, date and fig honey. And here is some samples that we brought back that were so enormous. The fruit was so enormous. One man could only carry one pomegranate. One man could only carry one fig. And it took 8 men to carry one cluster of grapes. So this is how incredibly great the produce of the land was. But they started, as Rashi explains, they started with a little bit of truth, because all false intelligence reports have to start with truth. All deception has to start with truth. Anytime a conspiracy is going to try to convince people to go along with it, it requires some truth to be the wrapper around it so that people become lulled and say, oh, that's true. And then the next thing, well, it sounds from a reliable source, but that's what we have to watch out for. So then it says, they talk about how strong this land, the people are living in the land, and the cities are so fortified and so strong, and there's just these superhumans there. And the point of this was to try to scare the Jewish people and to tell them that there's some sort of superhuman, super soldiers, super weaponry, and totally impenetrable defenses by the inhabitants of the land, that the Jewish people were commanded by God Almighty to go in and take the land, inherit the land. Then comes along the spies and the false intelligence report, and they say, Amalek Yeshev Ba'aretz HaNegev, Be'eretz HaNegev. Amalek is sitting in the southland, which was not even part of what the Jewish people had to directly go and conquer. Yet, what this mission to deceive and take off track the Jewish people was to start with reminding the Jewish people of a painful psychological shock that they would then want to avoid repeating it. So Amalek, let us remind yourself, was the nation that attacked the Jewish people coming out of the land of Egypt, going to Mount Sinai. Amalek attacked. And even though the net result of Amalek's war against the Jewish people was relatively small in terms of the damage they caused, it was still a shocking event. It was still a traumatic event. And now the spies, in trying to dissuade the Jewish people from going up to conquer the land of the Holy Land, they told them, oh, Amalek is also sitting over in that direction. The intention being that the fear of having to have another encounter with Amalek would be enough to tell people, let's back off. It's bad enough that we have to deal with all the other battles of conquering the Holy Land, but Amalek, let's avoid this. Now, this is an incredibly important lesson for us to understand. Like Rashi says, we were burnt once by them. We don't want to get burnt again. And this is how terrorism works. Terrorism is designed, it's crafted. Terrorism is part of the crafting of conspiracy to create a shocking experience for the person who is still alive. The target of the terrorism is not the dead people that God forbid die in a terrorist attack. The target of terrorism is the living people, that they should have such a shocking experience. And the more shocking it is, the more effective it is. That's why the attacks of terrorism are on soft targets, on vulnerable targets, horrifying targets. People are all horrified and shocked to it, in order to get the people to say, we don't want to have to go through that experience again. We will do anything to avoid that, including surrendering parts of the Holy Land, including doing whatever it takes to try to avoid another experience like that. So this is how terrorism works. We have to see around us whenever the news is playing up stories of terrorism. It's part of the plan of the terrorist act. It's part of the conditioning the people to become afraid and weak-hearted so that they will then try to avoid it. Now, then, if we continue in the Psukim, we see that the spies in their intelligence report falsely portray all the nations and the entire environment as this very, very hostile environment. Now, we know this is false information because we know from the Kriyas Yamsuf, from the Shir Yam, from the song of the splitting of the sea, and we know from what the spies heard later on, that when they went into the land of Israel in the time of Joshua, that the nations of the area were already scared of the Jewish people because of the fact that the miracles that God Almighty had done for them. But the spies instead came back and built up the portrayal of these people as hostile, completely not possible to defeat them. And this is part of the mission of the intelligence services, to falsely portray the rest of the world as being hostile, and therefore the good people will withdraw from trying to expand into those hostile places, saying it's not worth the effort, there's nothing that can be changed. Now, how do we see this in our own lives, in our own lifetime? Nazi propaganda, anti-Semitic propaganda, is often misinterpreted as being directed at the German people in order to inculcate in them a distaste to the Jewish people, and to then prepare them for supporting the removal of the Jewish people from the German population. But that is an incorrect understanding of the purpose of the Nazi propaganda. The actual target of the Nazi propaganda was the Jewish people, in order to surround them with a portrayal of anti-Jewish propaganda, to create the appearance that the entire German people and the entire population of the rest of Europe was all anti-Jewish. Therefore, the Jewish people would become more and more withdrawn and more thinking that they needed to be saved from this hostile German, this general German hostility. In fact, the Nazi Gestapo and the SS was able to portray themselves to the Jewish people and to the leadership as they came into each place, to say that they were actually going to save each Jewish community and relocate them to more favorable locations and protect the Jews from the hostility of the average non-Jew in the area. So the creation of the propaganda then created a spiritual disheartenment, a despair among the Jewish people, which then led them to fear fleeing the ghettos, fear fleeing into the forest, fear to flee and seek help from their non-Jewish neighbor, fearing to actually go and find out that many of their non-Jewish neighbors actually were against the Nazis. A large portion of the German population, a significant portion, was actually opposed to Hitler and the Nazi agenda on many different levels, and they were taking measures, as was a tremendous underground in Poland, to fight against the Germans. This was actually shut off from Jewish consciousness because of the propaganda that made the Jew look at the rest of the world as a hostile place. So this is exactly a repetition of what the spies did by portraying the nations around the Holy Land as hostile. Jewish people were like, we don't want to go there. We don't want to have anything to do with this. Now, this concept of using propaganda to portray the enemy or the other side or the other people as hostile is still in use today by intelligence services. This is a prime means in which to cause despair among the Jewish people in the Holy Land. is to create portrayals of the Arabs, of the hundreds of millions of Arabs, as all being hostile to the Jewish people. As a propaganda stunt, the terrorists will create parades with missiles and create parades with kids carrying machine guns, and they will have Arab propaganda materials on their stations. That is actually intended for the Jewish audience. It's intended for the Jew to see that and be afraid and see all the Arabs as hostile to him. Therefore, if the Arab is hostile to him, and there's actually 800 million of them all hostile to the Jew, he begins to think that the only way that he could possibly survive this is to create walls around himself, to shrink, to constrict, and seek help from other nations against this much larger number of people. But it's all false. It's all lies. All of their polls that say that the Arabs are all waiting to do terrorism and all lining up to do suicide missions and all this kind of polls and surveys and so forth are actually fabricated with the intention of creating despair among the Jewish people, who are the target of those polls, are the target of those surveys, and that the newspaper articles that are written about it and the pictures and so forth and the interviews are all done for the propaganda purpose of creating the fear in the Jew. And we have a similar situation in the United States of America, where there is an increasingly strong push in the media to create the appearance that there's some sort of inherent anti-Semitism among the whites in the United States of America, to cause the Jew to withdraw in fear and feel he needs the government's protection because the world seems to be hostile. And this is exactly how the Nazis operated to create the appearance that the world was hostile. This is how the Arabs, in conjunction with the intelligence services of the Israelis and the Arab intelligence services, worked to actually create this mirage in the mind of the Jew, who then goes into a state of despair. So this is what is happening in the United States also. And then what they do is they have these chats increasing the tension, the talk against the Jews, and people who are susceptible that fall into that. And then they are triggered by various things that the FBI is not even able to understand what exactly the interactions between the triggerers and the triggered people. Then they will go and what looks like a random attack on some sort of Jewish target, God forbid, with the intention of causing the Jew to think that he lives in a country that's hostile to him, and that there's growing hostility against the Jew. What happens when the Jew is afraid of hostility, sees hostility, and it's portrayed in the media and all these false intelligence reports and all these false national intelligence services reports and these false reports that are meant to take what is very, very small groups of people which actually have a large number of agents of the government in them, and the agents of the government police services and FBI and so forth in these groups are the ones riling them up. But the Jew then looks at it and he sees that there's a hostile world. What is he going to do? He's going to become more and more isolated. He's going to see the non-Jew as a hostile person, and he's going to look to the government and the police forces to save him. Well, that's exactly where Amalek wants the Jew to be. Amalek does not want the Jew to know that the non-Jew is eagerly awaiting to hear what the Jew has to say and wants to hear the Jews inspiring Torah guidance into the light of the Torah, the light into the nations. So that was how the Nazis managed to prepare and groom the Jewish people for the Holocaust, and how the Jewish people in the Holy Land are groomed for an inevitability of surrender to create a terrorist state on the Holy Land, and how they're groomed to build a wall to ghettoize themselves within a wall that is, they're told it's to stop these shocking, terrifying attacks, but really what its purpose is to stop them from having a mode of expansion rather than put them in a walled-in ghetto. So this we see in the Parsha. In fact, you don't need to read the newspaper, because the newspaper is just trying to repeat the exact same strategy as the spies to cause the Jews to despair. Now, tragically, what happens is the despair that comes from taking this news and these false intelligence reports seriously is so strong that a person will actually decide that he will not fulfill his mission in the world. He will not fulfill God Almighty's instructions to him. As the Jewish people who listen to this, the very men who have been selected between the ages of 20 and 60 from all the tribes except for the tribe of Levi, who were conscripted and charged with the tremendous holy responsibility to go into the Holy Land and conquer it and bring God's dominion to the Holy Land. Those very men became so despairing that they ended up saying they refused to go and conquer the Holy Land to fulfill God Almighty's mission. That's what despair will do. That's how a person one day could be ready, excited to go into the land of Israel, and the very next day he could be crying and insisting that he wants to go back and be a slave, and he refuses to carry out God's mission. What is the solution to this? The solution is, first, as I said, we don't read the news. The news is just a repeat. If you want to know what's going on in the news, all you have to do is read the Torah portion, read these psukim, read these verses, and you will understand what's really going on. And anything that's put into the media in order to scare you is intentionally planted and shaped. And with the television and the videos and the online and so forth, they can use pictures to increase the sense of terror, to look at these super strong people and look at these super strong soldiers. And now they make up stories about how such and such a country is going to create super soldiers and genetically modify all kinds of nonsense. Specifically, like the spies were reporting about the land of Israel has genetically superior individuals, have all kinds of lineage from great giants. This is the lies that are meant to cause people to despair. Now, so number one is we have to shut out the despairing information. But how do we keep away from the despairing information and keep to the truth, which is the Torah, and to the commandments that God Almighty gives us? And that is, the Torah tells us in this week's Torah portion, the mitzvah of tzitzis, the commandment to wear the fringes, that every Jewish man is commanded to wear a garment that has on it four corners. And that four corners, it says over here in the chapters 15 and verse 36, 37, and on to the end of the Torah portion, that their Jewish people are commanded to put these on their corners of the garments that they may see and not follow after their heart that may be weak-hearted and may be fearful and might then see the world in accordance with their sense of fear and their sense of inferiority and their sense of we're not sure if God is with them, and maybe these people are really stronger than them and maybe they're hostile. Comes along God Almighty and says, put these strings on your garments and don't go after your heart. Don't go after what your eyes see. But rather remember, I am the Lord your God that took you out of Egypt for this very purpose, that you should be able to go into the world and bring the light of the Torah into the world, and to bring the Holy Land, elevate the Holy Land into the service of God Almighty, so that we, the Jewish people, can be stewards on behalf of the world, so that it should be run according to God's will. And therefore, God is saying, be holy into his service, be consecrated. Every person must be, every Jewish man is wearing the tzitzis, has to be not only fulfilling the commandments, but be dedicated to the service of God Almighty. So I'm the Lord your God, says God Almighty, who took you out of the land of Egypt in order to be your God, because I am the Lord your God. Meaning to say that tzitzis is what keeps us on track. Now, there's many things that could distract us in the world. For example, we could be distracted by different inclinations over here and there and different appealing different sites and so forth. And for sure, tzitzis are coming to make sure we don't go after those things. But even more fundamentally, as a fundamental point, is tzitzis are coming to tell us don't follow the false intelligence reports. Don't follow the false information that is intended to cause you to despair, because it's despair then leads to all the other transgressions. First, the despair is a person decides he's not going to fulfill God's mission and bring the light of the Torah to the world and bring it to the entire world. Then once he's in a state, he's no longer in a state of expansion, but is rather in a state of contraction, then he falls prey to all the enticements and the extra chocolate cake and the extra this and this over here and that over there, because he's now in a place of weakness and a place of fear. So therefore, God's commandment is the tzitzis must keep us on track. And this takes us to the whole point of the prophecy of Zechariah 8:23, chapter 8, verse 23, in which Zechariah the prophet says, in the name of God Almighty, that will come the day when 10 among the nations, 10 among the languages of the nations will come and take the corners and grab the corners of the Jewish man and say, we know that God Almighty is with you. in order that you should teach us the way, and we want to go with you. What is actually happening over here? 10 men from the 70 general languages of the nations, taking the four corners. That's 10 times 70, that's 700 times 4 is 2,800 non-Jewish men, going and physically grabbing the tzitzis of the Jewish man. Why are they grabbing the tzitzis? Because the non-Jew will recognize it. It's the tzitzis of the Jew that kept the Jew on track. Well, whereas the rest of the world is despairing because they watch the news from all sides of the political spectrum. It's all the same despairing news. It's all the same news meant to try to get a person to despair. Some despair from this and some despair from that, but it's all designed to cause despair. They're going to realize, every human being is going to realize that the people who are not subject and falling prey to the despair are the Jewish people. And why are they not falling prey to the despair? Is because of the tzitzis. So that's why when they come and grab, that doesn't say they'll come and grab the hand of the Jew. Why can't the non-Jew come up and say, grab the Jew's hand and say, Rabbi, teach me, show me the way. I know the Lord is with you. No, it's specifically the tzitzis, because the tzitzis, the commandment of tzitzis, is the one through which God Almighty instructs and gives the strength to the Jewish man to be able to, no matter what is thrown at him in terms of false information, no matter how many badges and how many medals and so forth are on the general or the intelligence officer, how much the intelligence service tries to glorify its own reputation with all kinds of reports about its prowess, which are also designed as propaganda. No matter what he hears, he will not in any way be shaken off target. He's not going to in any way think, God forbid, for even an instant, that God is not able to take care of him and take care of the Jewish people, take care of every single human being, and he will rededicate himself to staying on the straight path to serve God Almighty in every instance and be able to bring that message of hope to every single human being. So the non-Jew is going to see that, and he's going to know the strength is from God Almighty, and particularly the commandment of tzitzis, and he's going to go grab the tzitzis and say, I want to be attached to this certainty. I want to be attached to this clarity. I want to be attached to this freedom from despair. I want to be attached to this hope for humanity, which is the hope that and the uncertainty that God Almighty is going to bring for the conclusion of the prophecy is that every single human being is going to be attached to a Jewish person. Every single Jewish person will be attached to God Almighty. Every single human being will be attached to God Almighty, and every single human being will be working together with a clear language, a Safa Barura, to serve God Almighty with the coming of Mashiach. We should experience it right now. Take the action points from what we just discussed. And Mitzvah Shem, if you want to watch more, the whole weekly class discusses this in much greater detail at rabbismith.org, the Zechariah 8:23 class. And Mitzvah Shem, you should all be blessed with an incredible Shabbos, and we should be zeichet to Mashiach now.
Now, just a moment before we are done. You are here because you are like me, not satisfied with the condition of the world and the Jewish people, objecting to the direction that confused people are running in, and intent on seeing God Almighty's vision for the world fulfilled. Torah is a manual for action, and we are taking action. At rabbismith.org, we have one goal: to connect every man, woman, and child with God Almighty. This is the only way forward, and that includes you. rabbismith.org has 2 tracks, one for non-Jews and one for Jews. My job is to help point you to the truth, that not only is the divine spark in you bursting out, but you have loving responsibility to those around you, and they will thrive from your clarity and your orientation. Now, join at rabbismith.org. We have new initiatives starting. We have just started a weekly class, Amunah, Faith in Action, to shepherd our faith and learn how to shepherd the faith of those around us. Videos, audios, materials, and newsletters. But most importantly, a relationship. The relationship of one person wanting the best for another and taking action to make that happen. At rabbismith.org, I will be asking you to make a personal undertaking to share what you learn with others and to spread the message of hope to every person, and to make a small daily contribution to support our joint vision and mission. Join us as we get the world on track for Mashiach, for redemption, and make it unfold. Enroll at rabbismith.org, and I will see you there.